This is the tragic story of Michelle Lee, a case that shocked her community and exposed a darkness hiding in plain sight. That afternoon, the hospital parking garage felt routine and unremarkable, like any other day. People moved in and out freely, unaware of what was about to happen. Michelle Lee, a nursing student, walked toward her car and never made it home. Her white Honda SUV was parked on the third floor of the garage, tucked into a corner she used often. Security cameras later showed Michelle entering the garage, slowing her pace, hesitating as if something caught her attention. Then, unexpectedly, she turned away from her car. What drew her off course was never fully seen. 17 minutes passed. Then her SUV exited the garage. By 9 o'clock that evening, the other nursing students were gathered to wrap up their final day of clinical rotations. Michelle was missing. Her jacket was still inside the break room. She hadn't signed out. Calls to her phone went unanswered. Concern quickly turned into alarm. Her instructor contacted hospital security, and together they returned to the parking structure. The space was empty and silent. No sign of Michelle. Then, suddenly, her SUV reappeared, rolling back onto the third floor. The instructor shouted, waving her arms, trying to get the driver's attention. The vehicle paused. Then it sped away. The instructor was certain of one thing. That was not Michelle behind the wheel. Police were notified immediately. By morning, Michelle had been missing for more than 10 hours. Friends, classmates, and co-workers flooded the police station, convinced something was terribly wrong. Investigators began with the garage. Near the spot where Michelle's car had been parked, they found blood. Not enough to answer questions, just enough to raise terrifying ones. Later that morning, Michelle's SUV was located a short distance away, locked and abandoned near an apartment complex. Inside were her belongings, her bag, her laptop, her identification. But there was something else as well. An ID card that did not belong to her. That discovery changed everything. This was no accident, no random act. Someone had planned this. Someone who knew Michelle's routine, her schedule, her habits, and whoever it was had gone to great lengths to make it look like she had simply disappeared. Then the messages began. Texts were sent from Michelle's phone to her family and friends. Short, unsettling reassurances. "I'm okay. I'm not missing." Each message told a different story. A flat tire, a sudden trip, a need to disconnect. None of it sounded like her. To her brother, Michael, the messages felt wrong. Cold, unfamiliar, empty of the warmth Michelle always carried. The more people read them, the clearer it became. Someone else was speaking in her name, and whoever that was, wanted time. As the hours passed, the messages sent from Michelle's phone grew more confusing. Each one painted a different version of events, as if someone were improvising a story in real time. Friends were told she had left town. Others were told she needed space. One message claimed her phone was malfunctioning, that everything had been wiped, that the battery was dying. Nothing lined up. Michael Lee read every text carefully. His sister was meticulous, thoughtful, consistent in how she spoke. These messages were none of those things. They lacked emotion. They lacked detail. Most of all, they lacked Michelle. Police agreed. The texts weren't proof of safety. They were proof of interference. Investigators began reconstructing Michelle's final movements. Surveillance footage showed her entering the garage at 6:55 p.m. Hospital records revealed something else. About 30 minutes later, a woman had called the emergency department, claiming to be Michelle. She asked to speak with her instructor. When told she had reached the wrong department, she insisted a message be passed along. The message was urgent. She said the father of her children had suffered a heart attack. The statement made no sense. Michelle didn't have children. To detectives, the call felt deliberate. A distraction designed to delay concern, to buy time. As the search expanded, volunteers combed nearby areas while police focused on Michelle's personal life. A reward was announced, then increased. Days passed with no sign of her. Hope began to thin, replaced by dread. One name surfaced again and again: Giselle Esteban. She and Michelle had once been close friends. They had lived together during college, shared classes, meals, late-night conversations. But something had fractured that bond. By the time Michelle disappeared, they were no longer speaking. The fracture had a name: Scott Marcan. Scott was Giselle's former partner and the father of her young daughter. Years earlier, after Giselle and Scott separated, Michelle and Scott had spent time together, casual, brief, and by all accounts, innocent. Both had agreed it was better to remain friends. Giselle never believed that. According to people close to her, suspicion took root and grew into fixation. She became convinced Michelle was interfering in her relationship, despite having no evidence. Michelle, for her part, refused to cut off Scott simply to calm Giselle's fears. That decision ended their friendship. When police interviewed Giselle, she made no effort to hide her hostility. She spoke bitterly about Michelle, describing her as disloyal and manipulative. Yet she insisted she had nothing to do with her disappearance. Investigators weren't convinced. Scott was questioned next. He appeared shaken, cooperative, openly distressed. He had joined search efforts himself and expressed genuine fear for Michelle's safety. When asked about Giselle, his tone changed. He handed detectives his phone. The messages Giselle had sent him were filled with anger, some vague, others unmistakably threatening. She accused Michelle of betrayal, of stealing, of ruining her life. One message warned that Michelle wouldn't be a problem much longer. Then Scott revealed something more disturbing. He had secretly recorded one of Giselle's outbursts months earlier. Their daughter had been in the car at the time. In the recording, Giselle's voice was calm, almost measured, as she spoke about Michelle. She said she would kill her, and she meant it. The recording changed the tone of the investigation. Until that moment, Giselle Esteban had been a name on a list, someone with motive, history, and unresolved anger. Now, investigators were hearing her own voice articulate violence with unsettling calm. It was no longer abstract. It was personal. Scott explained that Giselle's behavior had grown increasingly erratic over time. Their relationship had been volatile, marked by repeated breakups and reconciliations. At one point, Giselle had moved out and taken their daughter with her. Scott fought for stability, for routine, for his child's safety. Eventually, a court granted him full custody. That ruling made things worse. Giselle began showing up unannounced at Scott's home. Sometimes she would enter quietly and sit inside without saying a word, waiting to be noticed. On other occasions, arguments erupted in public. Police reports followed. Judges intervened. Just 3 days before Michelle vanished, a restraining order had been issued against Giselle, barring her from coming within 100 feet of Scott or his family. Investigators noted the timing. While police focused on Giselle, they also explored whether Michelle's case might connect to another disappearance from the previous year, a nurse with the same last name who had vanished in a different city. The similarities were unsettling, but one key detail stood apart. Michelle's car had been carefully locked and repositioned. Whoever last drove it was methodical. As evidence mounted, police formally questioned Giselle again. She appeared visibly pregnant and told detectives she had been at the hospital the night Michelle disappeared for a medical appointment. She acknowledged the broken friendship, describing it as a betrayal she never recovered from. Then she was released. But surveillance didn't stop. Investigators placed a GPS tracker on Giselle's vehicle. They followed her movements, mapped her routes, compared timestamps. Still, one question lingered. Could she have done this alone? That uncertainty didn't last long. Scott contacted police with a discovery that stunned them. Michelle's phone, the same device sending deceptive messages, was found in the back seat of his own car. He had no explanation for how it got there. Security footage soon provided one. Cameras showed Giselle's car circling Scott's neighborhood repeatedly in the days after Michelle disappeared. Investigators believed she had deliberately planted the phone to confuse the timeline and redirect suspicion. At the same time, hospital administrators uncovered another critical detail. The unidentified ID card found in Michelle's SUV had been reported stolen days earlier. Access logs revealed it had been used to enter restricted areas of the nursing school the day before Michelle vanished. Surveillance confirmed the person using it was Giselle. Disguised as a prospective student, she wandered through hallways, testing doors, observing schedules. Later, wearing a white lab coat, she returned after hours, retracing her steps with purpose. She examined computers. She studied desks. She learned exactly when Michelle would be alone. By the time Michelle walked into that parking garage, someone already knew she was coming. With Giselle's movements now tracked, investigators began layering digital evidence over physical surveillance. Cell tower data revealed that on the night Michelle disappeared, Giselle's phone and Michelle's phone were repeatedly located in the same areas, at the same times. Michelle hadn't gone anywhere on her own. Someone was moving for her. The following day, Giselle was captured on surveillance video entering an Apple store. She approached an employee and claimed her daughter had accidentally locked an iPhone. She asked for help unlocking it. The request seemed harmless. It wasn't. Once access was restored, Giselle left the store and was later seen sitting alone in a nearby restaurant. Security cameras showed her typing on the phone, Michelle's phone. From that location, messages were sent to Michelle's friends, continuing the illusion that she was alive and choosing to disappear. Cell records confirmed it. Every false reassurance, every misleading explanation, all of it originated from Giselle. Despite the absence of a body, the case against her was tightening rapidly. Investigators searched her apartment, her vehicle, her trash. They documented everything. Then they found blood on the soles of shoes near her front door. Forensic testing later confirmed it belonged to Michelle. Inside Michelle's SUV, they found more. A strand of Giselle's hair, her DNA on the steering wheel. At that point, the story Giselle had tried to control began collapsing under its own weight. Police arrested her at her home. She was 27 years old. She was charged with first-degree murder. Michelle was still missing. Her family held on to hope, even as reality pressed in. They spoke publicly, pleading not for justice yet, but for answers, for the chance to bring her home. While Giselle sat in custody, investigators examined her digital footprint. What they uncovered painted a disturbing picture of preoccupation and intent. In the days leading up to Michelle's disappearance, Giselle had searched for ways to cause undetectable heart attacks, how to follow someone without being noticed, how to gain access to secured buildings, the effects of carbon monoxide, the lethality of potassium chloride. After Michelle vanished, Giselle searched her name hundreds of times. She monitored the investigation obsessively. 3 months passed. Then, in a remote, rugged area miles from Giselle's home, search teams uncovered a shallow grave. Inside were skeletal remains. Time and exposure had erased soft tissue, leaving no definitive cause of death. But identity was certain. Michelle Lee had been found. For her family, the discovery ended hope, but began the long process of truth. For investigators, it confirmed what the evidence had been pointing toward all along. This hadn't been an impulsive act. It had been a decision. Giselle Esteban pleaded not guilty. When the trial began in September 2012, the courtroom filled quickly. Family members, reporters, and observers drawn by the disturbing trail of evidence and the unanswered question that still lingered in the air. Why? Prosecutors laid out a case built on preparation and fixation. They argued that Giselle had not acted in a moment of rage, but after days, possibly weeks, of planning. The stolen ID, the surveillance of schedules, the calculated use of Michelle's phone. Each step, they said, reflected intent. The defense countered with a different narrative. They admitted Giselle had killed Michelle, but insisted it wasn't premeditated. According to them, the encounter in the parking garage had spiraled out of control. What began as a confrontation, they claimed, escalated emotionally and violently in the heat of the moment. Giselle's attorneys pushed for a reduced charge of voluntary manslaughter. Giselle herself remained silent. She did not testify. She showed no visible emotion as evidence was presented. Photos, messages, recordings. Witnesses described her behavior. Experts explained digital timelines. Prosecutors replayed the recorded threat in her own voice. The jury listened. Michelle's family sat just feet away. They heard their daughter and sister described in the past tense. They watched as her final moments were reconstructed piece by piece. Michael Lee struggled to keep his composure as prosecutors spoke about Michelle's dream of becoming a nurse, following in the footsteps of their late mother. That dream, they said, ended in a hospital parking garage. Prosecutors argued that Giselle either waited for Michelle or lured her into the garage using knowledge gained from stolen access. They theorized the attack was swift and brutal, leaving little opportunity for resistance. The blood evidence supported it. So did the silence. No witnesses, no cries for help. They described Giselle as calculating, detached, and dangerous. When the defense rested, the jury deliberated. It didn't take long. They returned with a verdict of guilty on all counts, first-degree murder. As it was read aloud, Giselle showed no reaction. No tears, no shock, no remorse. Later, she remarked quietly that if she had been on the jury, she likely would have convicted herself as well. The judge, a veteran of decades on the bench, called the evidence some of the most disturbing he had ever reviewed. But sentencing was still to come. Sentencing day arrived heavy with finality. The courtroom was quieter than it had been throughout the trial, as if everyone present understood that what remained could not undo what had already been done. Giselle Esteban stood before the court, still composed, still distant. The judge spoke at length. He described a case defined by obsession and escalation, not confusion or impulse. He referenced the planning, the deception, the deliberate attempts to mislead investigators and prolong Michelle Lee's disappearance. He noted the absence of remorse, the chilling calm that followed the crime. Giselle was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison.